Cold winters, thick fog, and a terrifying truth hidden behind silent hills. Have you ever wondered how only 40,000 soldiers could stop a massive army of over 100,000? This is not just a story of victory, it is about a leader who acted like a shadow to change history. It was the year 1475 when the walls of Europe were trembling and Sultan Mehmed's army set out to crush everything. But in their way stood a man known to the world as Stephen the Great. Today, we tell the tale of that bloody marsh where the world's greatest power met its match. Stay tuned until the very last minute to see how one small mistake changed the fate of an entire empire. At that time, the Ottoman Empire was the only power in the world that no one dared to challenge. After conquering Constantinople, Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror set his sights on the lands of Moldavia. His intention was clear: to conquer all of Europe and spread the flag of the Crescent. An army of over 120,000 men, led by Suleiman Pasha, was now knocking on the gates of Moldavia. This was not just a war. It was a clash between two different civilizations and two powerful minds. The people of Moldavia knew that if they lost, their entire existence would be wiped out forever. But their ruler, Stephen, was no ordinary man. He was a brilliant, stubborn, and highly tactical warrior. Stephen did not have a massive army, nor did he have the advanced cannons and gunpowder of the Ottomans. He gathered his farmers, shepherds, and common people to stand together and defend their motherland. Only 40,000 people stood against a storm that was destroying everything in its path toward them. Stephen decided that instead of fighting in an open field, he would force the enemy to fight on his terms. He burned his own villages and poisoned the wells so the Ottoman army would suffer from hunger and thirst. This was a terrifying strategy of scorched earth that left the massive invading army confused and desperate. Every passing day weakened the Ottoman morale as the shadow of death grew darker around them. Stephen chose the location of Vaslui for the battle, a narrow valley surrounded by deep, treacherous marshes. Here, the enemy's great numbers and heavy equipment would actually become their biggest disadvantage. He waited for the thick winter fog, a famous feature of that region, to completely blind the enemy. Moldavian soldiers were hidden high up in the hills, watching every move of the Ottoman army passing below. Suleiman Pasha believed this would be an easy victory, and he could simply march through Moldavia. However, he was completely unaware that he had just walked into a massive natural death trap. There was a strange silence in the air, the kind that signals the arrival of a devastating storm. On the morning of January 10th, 1475, when the fog was so thick you couldn't see your own hand, the first sword was drawn. Stephen gave the order to blow the trumpets, but those trumpets were blown from behind the enemy, not in front. The Ottoman soldiers panicked, thinking they were completely surrounded from all sides in the blinding mist. Suddenly, a rain of arrows and heavy stones poured down from the hills, creating total chaos in the ranks. Their horses began to sink into the deep mud, and their long spears became useless in the narrow space. In the darkness and fog, it became impossible for the invaders to tell friend from foe. This was no longer a standard battle. It was the beginning of a massacre that history would never forget. Ottoman soldiers were sinking into the marsh, and their heavy metal armor became a weight that dragged them down. Stephen's lightly armed soldiers moved quickly through the mud, picking off the enemy one by one with ease. Suleiman Pasha tried desperately to control his army, but his voice was drowned out by the screams of the dying. Death was dancing everywhere, and the soil of the valley was turning deep red with the blood of thousands. The anger of the Moldavian soldiers and their passion for their land made them as strong as a stone wall. The Ottoman army, which set out to conquer the world, was now only concerned with escaping with their lives. The scene was so horrific that even the most experienced generals began to lose all hope. When the invading army saw that their escape route was blocked, a wild stampede broke out among the troops. Many Ottoman soldiers fell into the freezing river and drowned, while others were swallowed by the deep marsh. Stephen himself was present in the heart of the battlefield, encouraging his men to keep pushing forward. He gave the enemy no time to recover or regroup, launching attack after attack without any mercy. The sheer size of the Ottoman army became its own enemy as soldiers trampled over each other to flee. This was the moment when the world's most powerful military saw its pride crumble before its own eyes. The suspense now was whether Suleiman Pasha would escape alive or perish right there in the mud. In the middle of the chaos, Stephen unleashed his reserve forces, fresh soldiers who were hungry for victory. These soldiers launched a final, crushing blow against the exhausted Ottoman army, breaking their remaining spirit. The Ottoman flag fell to the ground, and their glory was dragged through the dirt and the blood. Suleiman Pasha, seeing that everything was lost, finally gave the signal for a full retreat. But the path back was also filled with death, as Moldavian cavalry chased them down through the woods. At every step, the bodies of the invaders fell, proving that greed for land often leads to a bitter end. History proved once again that intelligence and a better plan will always defeat a larger number of soldiers. Stephen did not stop just because the battle was won. He chased the retreating enemy for many miles. He wanted to teach the Ottoman Empire a lesson so they would never dare look at his land again. The soldiers who managed to escape the marsh were cut down by the swords of Stephen's fast-moving cavalry. This hunt continued through the dark of the night, giving the enemy no chance to breathe or rest. It is said that so much blood was shed that day that the water in the valley's streams turned red. For the Ottoman Empire, this was a wound so deep that it could not be healed for many years. This victory made Stephen a hero across Europe and earned him the title of the Defender of the Faith. When the sun rose and the fog finally cleared, the sight of the battlefield was enough to freeze the heart. The bodies of Ottoman soldiers and their broken equipment were scattered as far as the eye could see. Stephen offered a prayer of thanks for the victory and buried his fallen soldiers with the highest honors. It is estimated that more than 40,000 Ottoman soldiers lost their lives in this single, devastating event. Suleiman Pasha escaped with whatever was left of his army, but his heart was now filled with a permanent fear. When other kings of Europe heard the news, they were shocked that such a small state could perform such a miracle. But Stephen knew this was only the beginning, and the Sultan would surely return for revenge. When the news reached Istanbul that their great army had been humiliated in Moldavia, Sultan Mehmed's anger touched the sky. He took this defeat as a personal insult and immediately began preparing an even larger force for the next year. The defeat at Vaslui had badly damaged the invincible image of the Ottoman Empire across the known world. The Sultan decided he would lead the next campaign himself to ensure Stephen's head was brought to him. A wave of grief and anger spread through the empire, and every soldier was burning for a chance at revenge. But Stephen had not given up either. He was already making himself even stronger for the next inevitable clash. This was no longer just a war for land. It had become a war of ego and survival. The Battle of Vaslui taught the world how weather and geography can change the entire fate of a war. Stephen used the marshes, the fog, and the forests as his primary weapons, which proved more effective than cannons. He showed that if you know your land well, you can trap an enemy much larger and stronger than yourself. The biggest mistake of the Ottoman army was their arrogance, the belief that they were simply impossible to defeat. They underestimated Stephen's military genius and the deep love his people had for their home and freedom. Even today, the Battle of Vaslui is taught in military schools as a perfect example of a defensive war. This story tells us that with courage and a plan, any mountain can be moved. Hidden trumpets in the fog made the Ottomans think they were surrounded. Fear spread before a single sword was drawn. Stephen turned sound into a weapon, psychological warfare that shattered the enemy's courage. Stephen's victory stopped the Ottoman advance and earned him the title Athlete of Christ. It wasn't just religion. It was freedom, courage, and the survival of an entire people. Women, children, and farmers carried supplies, cared for the wounded, and supported the army. Their bravery turned ordinary people into a living wall of resistance. Numbers do not guarantee victory. Wisdom, planning, and knowledge of the land decide wars. Vaslui proved courage and strategy can topple even the mightiest empire. No enemy is too big to be defeated. Stephen's shadow still inspires hope, and the marsh of Vaslui whispers the story of bravery that changed history forever. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon so you never miss a story from the past.